The Voynich Manuscript is a late medieval codex. Contained within its pages is a yet undeciphered script, accompanied by seemingly bizarre, almost childlike illustrations, many of which have been crudely painted over in washes of colour. The book is almost certainly medieval, but was rediscovered by Wilfrid Voynich in 1912. The parchment on which it is written has been carbon dated to the early 15th century. Some of the pages appear to be missing, with around 240 remaining. It's likely that the current order of the pages is not the original, with the book having passed between potentially dozens of owners over 600 years. The manuscript has been studied by both amateur and professional linguists, codebreakers and cryptographers, including American and British codebreakers from both world wars. Despite many claims of decipherment, the script has never demonstrably been translated, with the mystery of its purpose and origin having eluded some of the greatest minds of the past 100 years. The manuscript itself measures 23.5 by 16.5 by 5 centimeters, making it only slightly larger than a modern paperback. The pages are collected into 18 quires, with the total number of pages varying depending on how you count a series of unusual foldouts. The quires have themselves been numbered 1 to 20, with various numerals consistent to the 1400s. From gaps in the numbering within the quires and pages, it appears likely that the book at one stage had at least 272 pages, many of which were already missing when bought by Voynich in 1912. Carbon dating done in 2009 puts the date of the parchment between 1404 and 1438, with later protein testing concluding that it is in fact calf skin. Further testing concluded that the parchment had been unwritten on before the manuscript was constructed, with the quality of the vellum being described of average at best. The goatskin cover is unlikely to be original. Insect holes are present on the first and last pages of the current order. This suggests that a wooden cover was present before the later ones. Analysis of the ink concluded that a quill pen and iron gall ink were used, with similarities between both the written and drawing ink making it likely that the illustrations and text were done at the same time. Analysis of the paints used on the drawings resulted in some interesting findings. The blue paint was proven to be ground azurite, the white a mixture of egg white and calcium carbonate, and the green a copper and copper chlorine resonate. The red-brown paint contained red ochre and iron sulfide. Interestingly, these paints wouldn't have been considered very expensive. That, and the small size of the manuscript, starts to build an interesting picture about its importance at the time. As for the text itself, it is present on every remaining page of the manuscript, with the bulk of it being in a yet undeciphered language, except for some extraneous writing done at a later date in Latin. A script of between 20 and 25 characters accounts for all those present within the text. There are no obvious signs of punctuation. The text does appear to follow some form of linguistic rule set, with some characters appearing in every word, and some never seeming to follow on after others, although the distribution of the characters themselves is somewhat peculiar. The illustrations within the book provide perhaps the most tantalizing clues as to its purpose, and are commonly used to separate the book into 6 distinct sections. By far the largest section of the manuscript, it contains illustrations of plants next to paragraphs of text. Many of the plants are odd-looking and ambiguous in nature, seemingly combining parts from multiple types of fauna together. This section contains circular diagrams that appear to depict something akin to astronomy or astrology. One series of 12 diagrams depicts commonly accepted representations of the zodiac constellations. However, Aquarius and Capricorn appear to be missing, while Aries and Taurus are split into 4 paired diagrams. This is a dense section of text, only occasionally interspersed with diagrams, mostly of small nude women, often bathing in pools connected by almost umbilical-looking pipes. This section enfolds a number of obscure-looking diagrams, the largest of which being a 6-page long foldout consisting of a series of islands connected by causeways containing castles. There also appears to be a depiction of what might be a volcano. Within this section, there are further drawings of what appear to be plant roots, as well as what might be apothecary jars. These drawings range from being fairly mundane to fantastical in nature. They are accompanied by a few short paragraphs of text. The final intact section contains large segments of text appearing to describe recipes of some kind, each marked by a small star in the lower left-hand margin. A lot of the history of the book is unknown. With its author a mystery, it's led many to guess about its origin, with the commonly accepted understanding being that it appears to be European in nature. The first confirmed owner of the book was a 17th century alchemist from Prague, named George Beresch. Beresch was intrigued by a book that had been taking up space uselessly in his library. He would send a copy to Athanasius Kircher in Rome, previously known for his work deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphs. Upon Beresch's death, the book was handed off to his good friend Jean-Marie Marcy, who years later would send the book back off to Kircher. Along with it, he would send this cover letter. Reverend and distinguished Sir, Father in Christ, this book, bequeathed to me by an intimate friend, I destined for you, my very dear Athanasius, as soon as it came into my possession, for I was convinced that it could be read by no one except yourself. The former owner of this book asked your opinion by letter, copying and sending you a portion of the book which he believed you would be able to read the remainder. But he at that time refused to send the book itself. To its deciphering he devoted unflagging toil, as is apparent from attempts of which his I send to you herewith. And he relinquished hope only with his life. But his toil was in vain, for such sphinxes only obey no one but their master, Kircher. Accept now this token, such as it is, and long overdue though it be, of my affection for you, and burst through its bars, if there are any, with your wanton success. Dr. Raphael, a tutor in the Bohemian language to Ferdinand III, then King of Bohemia, told me that said book belonged to Emperor Rudolf, and that he presented the bearer who brought him the book 600 ducats. He personally believed the author was Roger Bacon, the Englishman. On this point I suspend judgment. It is your place to define for us what view we should take thereon, to whose favour and kindness I unreservedly commit myself and remain. At the command of your reverence, Jonas Marcus Massey of Kronland, Prague, 19th of August, 1665. Voynich took the claim that the 13th century Phoenician friar and polymath Roger Bacon was the author very seriously, attempting to have it verified on multiple occasions, although in recent years this has been largely discredited. However, the claim that the book was owned prior by Rudolf is backed up by evidence found within the manuscript itself, that being the now illegible signature of Jacobus Horsicki de Tepens, the head of Rudolf's personal botanical gardens in Prague. From here, all records of the book disappear for almost 200 years. The book reappears in 1903 in the holding of the Society of Jesus, who in 1912 sold off many of their scripts to raise funds. Wilfrid Voynich bought 30 of these books, including the one that would come to bear his name. From here, the Voynich family would own the book for over 50 years, with Voynich spending much of his life attempting to decode its contents. Upon his death, it was inherited by Voynich's wife Ethel. When upon her death in 1960, it was left to her good friend Anne Nill. A year later, Nill would sell the book to an antique book dealer, Hans P. Krauss, who picked up where Voynich had left off. By the end of the decade, he had given up hope deciphering it himself, and in 1969 donated the book to Yale University, who catalogued it and still hold the manuscript to this day. Over the years, a number of theories have been put forth to explain the contents of the book, although, as of yet, none have been found conclusive. According to this theory, the manuscript is in fact a code of sorts, and that it does contain some form of meaningful text. Each letter of the alphabet would have been translated to the Voynich script through a cipher. This was the hypothesis of many of the 20th century attempts to decode the script, including that of the NSA cryptographers in the early 1950s. The age of the book also roughly coincides with the genesis of cryptography, making it likely that authors at the time would have had the means to transcode such a script. However, this theory is long thought to be largely discredited, since it fails to match any of the in-use cipher techniques at the time. The way the scripture is written also has a fluidity to it. It's not written how a person would write a code in a careful, deliberate manner. This theory would state that the bulk of the text in the manuscript is almost entirely meaningless, with the meaningful information hidden throughout. For example, in the first letter of every line, or the start of every third word. This way of hiding useful information throughout a text is very old, and so would likely have been in use at the time. However, this theory isn't a huge amount of help when it came to decoding the text itself. Perhaps the most commonly accepted theory of the modern age is that the manuscript does in fact contain some form of entirely undiscovered natural ancient language. Believers of this theory argue that upon analysis, the script falls in line with many other natural languages like English or Latin. They point to things like the word entropy and the way in which the text appears to have been written, fluidly, without much hesitation or pause for thought. It would seem as though writing came naturally to the author. Other researchers have since pointed out similarities to ancient Germanic languages or even that of ancient Turkish or Mandarin. Similar to the idea of the text containing a natural language is the one that it's actually a constructed language. This was the conclusion of William F. Friedman, head of the NSA attempt in the 1950s, although the earliest known writings on the subject are from the 1600s. However, this is still a possibility held in contention. The hoax theory has likely gone through the minds of many who attempted to decode the manuscript over the centuries. From the unusual way the text is written to the seemingly fantastical illustrations they accompany, it's not hard to see why you might conclude that the book contains no meaningful information within its pages at all, with some early on accusing Voynich himself of having fabricated the whole thing. However, with the detailed history of the manuscript that has now been unearthed, this seems extremely unlikely. If the manuscript is a hoax of some kind, it is surely an ancient one. Since the Voynich manuscript was rediscovered in 1912, many have claimed to have deciphered its contents. Here are some of the more notable ones. In 1921, William Romain Newbold of the University of Pennsylvania would announce that he had cracked the code. His hypothesis stated that the text itself was unimportant, but hidden within the characters was a code that equated to ancient Greek shorthand. However, his theory was later dismissed as being largely speculative, as it never resulted in any practical translation. Amateur cryptographer Lionel C. Strong claimed to have deciphered the manuscript and revealed it to be written by 16th century English author Anthony Ashcombe. Notes made public upon his death revealed that the latter stages of his decipher method were largely subjective, and this would lead to widespread dismissal of his theory. In late 2017, Professor Greg Kondrakt and his student Bradley Hauer claimed to have translated the manuscript. They presented their findings at a conference, claiming that the language was some form of ancient Hebrew, although these claims were later refuted by medieval linguistic experts. In 2018, a team comprised of Ahmed Ardik and his two sons presented their findings on the Voynich manuscript. They concluded that the manuscript is written in a form of ancient Turkish, and that previous attempts to decipher the script were done from a fairly Eurocentric viewpoint. Thus far, they've claimed to have translated over 600 words, including a full page of text. As of yet, their work has not been fully peer-reviewed, or their methods fully revealed to the public, casting some doubt on their claims. The impression given from the surviving pages of the Voynich manuscript is that it is made to address the topics of medieval medicine. That said, the many bizarre illustrations have led many to disagree with this narrative. The early section of the book, being by far the largest, is almost certainly centered around herbal medicine of some sort. However, attempts to identify the plants found within the pages has only led to more questions. Very few of them are identifiable in any form, and those that are seem to have improbable details added onto them. As for the astrological side of things, research has remained speculative. It's known that some forms of medieval medicine focused heavily on astrology for guidance, but apart from the obvious astrological signs depicted within its pages, much of it remains a mystery. It seems likely that with a continued effort, the text within the manuscript will eventually be translated. What will be revealed on that day can only be speculated, but for now at least, the book will keep its secrets, as currently the mystery of the Voynich manuscript remains unsolved.